Dr. Cintli worked with the concepts of elder youth epistemology and running epistemology and won the 2013 Baker Clark Human Rights Award from the American Educational Research Association. Dr. Cintli is also the author of Yolki, a warrior summoned from the spirit world, published by University of Arizona Press on violence against the Black, Brown, Indigenous communities of the United States. In 2016, he received an award from the National Association for Ethnic Studies in recognition and appreciation as conference chair for the 44th annual conference at the University of Arizona. Aside from speaking around the country on his research areas to university audiences, he has also spoke at K-12 schools, but particularly K-6 regarding Mai's creation stories of this continent. For the academic year of 2017 through 2018, he spent most of the year in the Yucatan Peninsula and southern Mexico, presenting at academic conferences regarding his work on Mai's, and more importantly, researching Maya philosophy, language, and culture for a part 2 to the Mai's book. And lastly, you might be wondering, how did Dr. Cintli get his name, Dr. Cintli? According to Dr. Patricia Gonzalez, the name came from Mrs. Algelberta Cobb, who gave him the ceremonial name Cintli, which is referred to as a sacred maíz or sacred corn. And Dr. Cintli is how we at the Alianza Indigena Sin Fronteras have known him. Now Dr. Cintli rests with the ancestors as he left this world on July 31st, 2023. With this episode of the Indigenous Podcast Without Borders released on December 10th, 2023, we recognize that it is Human Rights Day and that we must continue fighting for the dignity, freedom, and justice for the people still directly impacted by the current systems of oppression that Dr. Cintli has published about. With that, please listen to the following stories about Dr. Cintli's legacy that he left behind. Chogotesia, Namakasya Nim Yoemia.
So my name's Yvette Boiso. My Nawa name is Xochiyot. I go by Yvette Xochiyot. I am Nawa from an indigenous community in Hidalgo, Mexico. And I came to the States when I was 15. At the moment, I'm in school for political science. I work with people for mental health, patients, civil, human, indigenous rights, immigration, criminal law, anything in between. So my job is to make sure they understand the rights, that they're being protected, exercised, and provide them with the tools and information they need to navigate the system. I'm an activist as well. I became a community organizer during 2020 with the uprising from George Floyd. Through my work with the Zapatista community, I met Dr. Cintli.
You said you met Dr. Cintli through that organization. Can you go a little more in depth with that?
It's kind of funny because in the community, people share each other's work and books. And I had seen already some of his work and clips from I believe it was the History Channel or National Geographic about his work with the Mayans. And I was just kind of blown away, but I had never really looked into it. In 2021, I organized this global call to action with 20 countries and groups from all over the United States. The intention was to call out Biden before he came into office for the promises we knew he was not going to keep. And part of that work also involved immigration and the killings from the police departments, any law enforcement agency in the country, and immigration, the killings of people by Border Patrol, and the deaths of the children inside detention centers. So I brought it back to the Asamblea. And when another Roberto from San Diego, he's also a professor, told me, I know exactly who you need to talk to. So he introduced me to Dr. Cintli. By then, Dr. Cintli had already put a group of around 50 people from all over the country. There were social workers, lawyers, professors, activists, impacted families. So I just kind of came on board last minute. But the minute that I talked to him, we started talking about each other, right? And kind of getting to know each other. Then the conversation went from police brutality to the Dr. No discovery. All of a sudden, I knew with all my heart that that was the person that I had been looking for. And since then, we just kind of got to know each other better. We started working for one reason or another. When we made the call for volunteers, it was only around 10 people, including myself. I became the project manager. So for the last 3 years, him and I talk constantly. He became more than just a mentor. He became like my tío. He became like a father figure in my life. We will talk almost every day. And sometimes the work got so heavy. So we will take pauses here and there. And, him being a survivor of police brutality, there were times that it got really difficult. And during those times, we really had each other to push forward. And throughout those 3 years, we got to know each other to such a deep level, so personal. He came to my house. He stayed here for a few days. He met my family, my children. We all call him Profe in this house. It started with a working relationship, but it evolved into a very personal friendship more than anything. So for the last few years of our lives, we were constantly in each other's lives.
That's such a beautiful relationship that you had with him. I'm really glad that you had the chance to develop that relationship with him. With that being said, do you have any favorite memories of Dr. Cintli?
There was one time that we went out for dinner and he came with Patty. And Patty is his ex-wife, but I have to admit that I don't like saying ex-wife because it was almost like there was no Roberto without Patty. And we were gonna take a picture. He didn't like to smile in pictures. So Patty got close to me and she told me the secret to make him smile in pictures. And we just started laughing. It was so funny. And my friend captured that moment in a picture. So the picture that we have together of just the two of us is from that time where Patty revealed the secret. And I just love that my friend was there to capture that little moment in time. There's so many memories. I think I have a hard time just picking one, but just that one from that night, it was awesome. And especially because it was captured. So that's definitely one of my favorite ones.
So you're the second person who has good memories with both Dr. P and Dr. Cintli. If it's okay with you, would you be able to explain their dynamic with each other?
I didn't meet them when they were still married, but I've seen their work and I met them in more of a family dynamic. And one of the things that really it speaks to my heart is that Dr. Cintli always spoke to Dr. Gonzalez, Patty, as an equal. Like there was nothing that he will do or will not do without Patty being right next to him. And I think that was so beautiful because even after their marriage, that's the dynamic that they kept with each other, right? Like every time that I saw them, like at that time that they came to California for a family event, just the way that he talked to her or about her, it was beautiful. It was such a beautiful, caring love that I think it transcends more than just the aspect of marriage or relationships. In the context that we think about those relationships today, I think their love and care for each other just transcended more than a piece of paper. And to know a lot of the contributions that he's made to our community were with Patty. It's just amazing because it's almost like they completed each other. They were each other's balance. And that's what I got to see. So it's hard for me to think about him without her.
Do you have any idea of Dr. Cintli's involvement in documenting police brutality with the database he created?
So I have to say the database is the culmination of something that started with him the night that he almost got killed by the police. Throughout that entire time, and I want to say Dr. Cintli, from what I got to see and from what I hear, including through his work in his books, the way that he explains things, it's almost like he allows you to see the world through his eyes. I think even as a young Chicano, he was curious about the world and why things happened the way they did. For one, he was a little kid when Ruben Salazar got killed, like a couple blocks down the street where he used to live. So what did he do? He ran with his brother and stood outside the silver dollar to see what was happening. And then he heard Ruben Salazar had gotten killed by the police. And he knew right then and there that he wanted to become a journalist. And that was in honor of Ruben Salazar. So the irony is that around the same area, this is only a couple blocks away from where Ruben Salazar got killed, that he got beaten by the police years later, right? So during his trials and after he won both of the trials, he just kept seeing this pattern of behavior that kind of repeats itself over and over again in the same communities. So it was the same people being affected. And obviously there were times during those years, things that happened that just kind of pushed them more. Like it fed that drive to look deeper into it. And then some databases were created, like the Washington Post. And so he will go and look at them throughout the years. And that's when he started noticing that people with last names like Gonzalez, Martinez, Lopez, Hernandez were either in the unknown or white categories. So this is something that he had been observing for years. And I think in his Yolki book, he kind of touches on that a little bit in terms of the spiritual violence. And then he started meeting other families. He had a couple families come to the university where he thought to speak about their experiences. So finally, he decided to put the group of people together in, I think, 2020. I think they had already been talking about it before the pandemic, but because of the pandemic, it just kind of put the work on hold. But this is something that he had been observing for a long time. So this database is really the culmination of all those years and all the observations that he had made throughout those years.
You had a deep personal relationship with him. You know about his past. You read his books. What do you think Dr. Cintli would want the audience to know his legacy is?
It's kind of hard because he always said that he didn't want the violence inflicted on him to be his legacy. So we have works like the Maíz book. We have definitely the Yolki book, which he didn't want to include his own testimony, but he did. So I think if I have to choose one word, it will be identity. Our identity. I think that's what all the works that he did throughout his life allude to who we are as people. And that we are not less human than anybody else, that we are full human beings, and he fought for our humanity. That's what he did, all the works that he did when he was leading the fight for Mexican American studies in Arizona. I think it was around 2012. That's what he was fighting for, our humanity. When he's teaching us about our identity through the Maíz work, is for us to remember that we are full human beings and we deserve dignity and that we deserve respect just like everybody else. And ultimately, the work on police brutality and violence, that's exactly what it's doing, reminding the system that we are human beings and that our lives are worth fighting for and protecting, just like, again, like everybody else. But I think that's the legacy right there, that to fight for our identity, because our identity is of a full human being, not of savages like they redeemed us to be since 1492.
And then I just have one more question for you. I know you were touching about it a lot, but do you have any closing statements or thoughts you'd like the audience to know about him?
And I'm so glad that I got to tell him this before he passed. But I think he has been one of the greatest people in our lifetime. Not only as an academic or a researcher, as a poet, journalist, he transcended more than any of these labels. I used to tell him, you're like the Ruben Salazar of our time. You're just too humble to accept it. I would say, please look him up. Buy his books, read these accounts that he left for us through his own words, through his own eyes. Get to know him through the works that he's left, because that's the legacy right there. There's so much work for us to do, but he left enough for us in those books, in the columns, in the research study. He was just a great, great human being. He was a great man, and he really lived and died for our people. The night before he passed, the last email we received from him was about the research. So when I tell you that he lived and he died for us, I mean it. We were probably one of the last things in his mind before he passed away. That was Sunday night. Monday, we woke up to the news that he was gone. So the character, the type of person that he was just full of love and compassion for his people, that he truly, truly dedicated his entire life to the work that he's left for us to him.
My name is Alicia Navakoya. I'm a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, and I'm married into the Comanche Nation. I am a lawyer, and an American Indian Studies professor. I teach at Bacone College. And I have a consulting firm called Talking Leads that I do lots of different American Indian consulting, from housing and houselessness issues to environmental justice.
How do you know Dr. Cintli?
Dr. Cintli and I were graduate students at the University of Wisconsin together. I don't know too much about that, but I do know that his experience with police brutality, it was a significant event in his personal life that informed his professional life as well. He wanted to make sure that everyone was safe and secure, and that we lived in a system with anti-bias and fairness and equality for everyone.
Did you and Dr. Cintli ever work together?
We collaborated together. We didn't work together per se. He has asked me to author a couple of articles for books that he has written, some about Choctaw corn theory, some on Choctaw corn creation stories. And we talked a lot. We were thought partners through a lot of different issues, from the origins of Aztlan to corn to mound building to, whatever the topic was of the day. I think the last topic of conversation that we had been discussing was mound building among the Uto-Aztecan people. He had a question for me. He wanted to know what I thought spiritual abuse was. And so we had been discussing things like that together. It was an ongoing and evolving conversation over the years. I mean, it wasn't just, we're going to talk about this today. It was, we will take up the conversation again when we meet up again, or when the thought hits. So our conversations lasted and evolved over years, probably decades now. So it was a relationship that I really, really cherished. I miss him wonderfully. He was a wonderful person.
Do you have any personal favorite memories with him?
So I met Roberto before I met his wife, Patricia. And we had been, thought partners in grad school at the University of Wisconsin. And I was pregnant at that time with my first child. And Roberto was telling me about his wife all the time, and how she's a midwife, and she's Comanche, and she's Kickapoo, and she's done all of this wonderful research in midwifery and traditional healing and birthing practices. And so I don't know why I called him on the day that I started having labor pains and giving birth, but I called him and talked to him, and he said, "Hold up, Alicia. I'm going to send Patricia over there right now, and she's going to help you through your birth." So he sent Patricia over to be my midwife while I was giving birth to my first son. It was Patricia's first birth as a midwife. It was my first baby, and it was a beautiful, brutal, and emotional time, and that I really got to bond with Patricia. And so our relationship from there just sort of blossomed as they were married, and became great friends with both of them. And I cherish both of them so much.
Sounds like you had contact for him for a very long time, up until he passed. What do you think he would like the audience to know about him and his legacy as a whole?
Maybe that he was a badass. I mean, he was a true activist. He was an academic. He was fierce. He was passionate. And he was a wonderful teacher and a wonderful guide through this life, and a wonderful thought partner, and a person that you wanted to be friends with because he was loyal and truthful and honest and real.
Is there any other things you want to say about him?
There's so much that I would want to say about him, to his family, and to everyone who loved him. I just want to give my best wishes to everybody, and hope that they're making it through this life with the solid memories that Roberto left behind for all of us. And the academic knowledge that he left for everybody will live on. His legacy is enduring and infinite, and will live on forever.
Thank you, friends and relatives, for listening to the Indigenous Podcast Without Borders. The music in this episode was called Fruto de Sonora and was composed by Ms. Soden on SoundCloud. If you are further interested in our organization, you can visit our website at indigenousalliance.org.